And just before we go back to how's it going, I just want to say this is Elvin Bishop. I've been a fan for many years, seen him at least a half a dozen times, opened for him once. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Blues Hall of Fame, and probably like 40 other things that I don't know about or won't name unless you want to, Elvin. But it's a thrill to be able to speak to you. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
So I guess, the first question I was thinking, and maybe it's a doozy, but you're 10 years old and you're in Oklahoma. Is that correct? Basically.
Yeah.
And you eventually you hear blues music on this radio station from Nashville.
Right.
And that's kind of what turned you on to your life's course, is this hearing blues. And what I find really fascinating, and it's kind of jumping over stuff, is okay, and then you're 18 and you have a physics scholarship. Physics, which the only thing I know about physics is it's atoms and particles. Well,
I got a scholarship, and you have to, have a major. So I started out in physics until I got to the rough part of it, and then I switched over to English. It was a little more human, and then I went to music. It was all the way human.
Well, I'm glad. Now, and I've been talking too much, but I want to get to this point. So you're 18, and it's like roughly 1960 or 61, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And Chicago, and with this mission, unless I'm over, dramatizing it, to like seek out the blues masters. And because they're there. There's Hound Dog Taylor, there's Howlin' Wolf, and I mean, that seems amazing to me in a way, because it's like, what made you such a hip 18-year-old? Like,
I wasn't hip. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just was trying. I love blues, and I knew Chicago was where blues was at. And I got the scholarship, and I wanted to get along with my parents and make them happy. And we come from a long line of farmers, and nobody had ever been to college in our family. And education was a real big thing. They'd been through the Depression and all that, and so it would have been very unpopular to blow that. So I went and did the school thing for as long as I could stand it. And in the process, got lucky and made a lot of friends in the blues community and got deep into that. And I never had a plan. I'm always the last guy to find out whatever it is, I just kind of stumbled around trying to do what what I felt like doing.
Well, in a way, it's, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like a beautiful American phenomenon that that's very unique to like your generation in a sense, and that generation in Chicago is like basically a bunch of like white young kids seeking out these Black musicians. And I mean, that's unique. Like, let's say Eric Clapton or those guys over in England, they couldn't do that. You guys did it, and it's amazing. It really makes me happy, that happened, and these guys took you under your wing, from what I understand.
Yeah, they were way nicer than they needed to be, and it was overdue for blues to cross over to the general public, because in those days, the only place you could go and hear blues most white people would be, the only place they'd ever see it would be in a folk festival. They had one token blues artist on every festival, you know, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee or
Yeah.
somebody like that, you know. And either that or go down in the ghetto to the clubs, and that's the only place the blues musicians had to play. They didn't do big concerts in those days, and like that. So it and blues is such beautiful music. If people get exposed to it, they'll love it, you know. And it was about time for that to happen.
Well, you know, you certainly contributed to that. And I feel that way about a lot of kinds of music, even now. You know, I love 60s country music with pedal steel guitar. And
Yeah.
and some people, civilians or people who aren't into music, I tell them I'm into country music. And they kind of look at me like really? You know, it's like like hee-haw or something kind of corny where it's like,
Well, country music now has kind of done what blues has done. It's become formalized and generic and you know, when when I started out listening to blues, there wasn't this formula of you have to have a bass player and a drummer and a piano and horns and the bass player has to always be going dun 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 dun, dun, you know. It was way looser and more varied. And country was the time you're talking about with Lefty Frizzell and Webb Pierce and Kitty Wells and people like that. I loved that. I kind of stuck with it up until George Jones and Merle Haggard, and after that, it kind of lost me.
yeah, I mean, sometimes I think I like the artists before they grew a beard.
Yeah,
But, you know,
like Ray Price, huh?
well, Merle, somebody else too, Johnny Paycheck, who on the Little Darlin label is
Yeah.
fantastic, you know. But what you said made me think of your new record, that there's, unless I'm missing something, sometimes there's hand claps and there's like an upright bass clicking and it sounds so full and it's so grooving. And there isn't a drummer pounding away or even playing brushes, and it's so great. You know, it kind of, I mean, I haven't been listening to much blues lately, and listening to your new record, I'm like, why haven't I been? And I've been listening to that, but this morning I put on some Muddy, and you know, it like kind of brought me back to the stuff I
There you go. Yeah.
and it's just great. But kind of still going on to your past, if you don't mind. Let's see, I have some notes. Okay, then the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. And you put out that first record. I have that. It's, for what it's worth, it's number 468 on the Rolling Stone magazine's list of 500 greatest albums of all time. You have Jerome Arnold and Sam Lay, which was Howlin' Wolf's rhythm section. Is that okay? And on it, you co-wrote one tune, and it's "Our Love Is Drifting" with Mike Bloomfield. And I want to get to you as a songwriter, because it strikes me odd that you, a songwriter, a great songwriter, at this point, even though you're 23 years old, so you're still a kid, wrote a co-write. But that'll prompt me, how was it working with Mike Bloomfield? Did you guys have a natural chemistry? And did you work out parts, or did things come organically?
Both, really. We'd go for it first, and then maybe if we didn't think that quite buttered the biscuit or wasn't good enough, we would sit and work out harmonies and stuff, or try to. A lot of times we would try to do it like horn parts, you know.
Yeah, that seemed
harmonies, and that wasn't being done in those days, so that was kind of cool.
No, it kind of leads to, I mean, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit here, but of the East West record,
Mhm.
Um, Not to make this about me, but I got that record when I was 12 years old. And I have an older sister, and her boyfriend was playing the track East West. Okay. And, it just called my name. And I ended up loving the whole record.
You were 12?
Yeah.
Pretty 12-year-old.
Yeah. I mean, not as hip as going to Chicago and meeting, Howlin' Wolf, but yeah, looking back, yeah, and I was a bit in not the same, I don't want to call it a void, but my parents probably were listening to Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass or something like that,
Right.
and I ended up finding some good music, and East West was definitely one of them. Now, the track East West, I just have a couple questions that are probably self-indulgent, but if you don't mind. On your solo, I think it's the first solo. You're doing like a raking thing, and it's pretty jazzy. And I was wondering, I know of a few of your probably many blues influences, but who is a jazz influence? Like, does anybody come to mind?
We were listening to all kinds of stuff in those days. Um, yeah, I like John Coltrane. I liked Cannonball Adderley, uh, Horace Silver, guys like that, Jimmy Smith, Kenny Burrell.
Yeah, I was thinking Kenny Burrell, but it's a great solo. It's a great track too. I love during the Bloomfield Middle Eastern thing. I think you're playing some like open D drone notes, and they sound so mystical. They're great. And there's the section, and this kind of gets into what you were saying a minute ago. There it goes to the major thing, and Mark Knopfler goes to this really wonderful guitar part, piano part, and you guys start kind of doing this like counterpoint improv. And I was listening to it the other day, just revisiting some of your music before we talk, because I wanted to give you, at least not be an idiot. And it dawned on me that you were it sounded like Mountain Jam by the Allman Brothers a bit. But years ahead of it, it was groundbreaking, really, the way you two were playing together on that section. It's really lovely.
I don't remember it that well.
Well, I highly recommend it.
I'll tell you something. That was an amazing mixture of influences. I really know nothing about Indian music. Nobody else did but Bloomfield. And his was just sort of an outsider's impression, and he did it very well, He actually used to, at the Fillmore, I remember him, he'd get one of these big sticks they play the kettle drums with. He's got the big fuzzy ball on the end. He'd dip it in lighter fluid, and he would, while that groove was going on, he'd do a fire eating thing. And all those poor old hippies on LSD would just lose their minds.
My final
Arnold definitely knew nothing about Indian music, and he and I both only had a general impression of jazz. I've never been able to actually play jazz, but the groove of the thing, it sounds a little bit exotic. You know what it is? It's a thing that was common in Chicago blues at the time. Every blues show would have one little segment. Yeah, they did a variety of things to try and keep the audience interested. It wasn't straight, straight 12-bar blues. There would always be a shake dancer, some chick that would come on and do exotic dance, shake dancer, snake dancer, some of that. And they would always play something like Caravan or some vaguely Eastern sounding groove, And that's, if you listen to the bass part of that song, that's what that is.
I love the bass part on that song. And it's basically this monolithic pattern he just keeps repeating, and it just grounds everything when Bloomfield's, you know, just going out, out rhythmically and everything else. There's that rock solid bass part. I love it.
Yeah, that's the story on that.
I also wanted to ask you about on that record, Never Say No, which I think is just a great performance. And it's I always imagine you guys like recording that at like 1 a.m. with like candles in the studio or something. But can you do you remember anything about doing that, or
Well, I remember that I didn't sing it nearly as well as the guy who did the original, Percy Mayfield.
I've never heard the original.
Yeah, you should check it out. It was Ray Charles produced an album for Percy Mayfield, and I kind of took Percy Mayfield as one of my songwriting heroes, because he didn't have that much of a voice, and that necessitates coming up with a real strong story if you're going to capture people's imagination. So that always was one of my aims.
Yeah, it's totally successful, and it's like a study in slow. I mean, it's so successfully slow. And I love that it just kind of ends like almost tragically with this, I think it's a sharp 11 chord or whatever, but it's just great. And I'll definitely check out the Percy Mayfield. But the thing about your vocals, and I was thinking this morning, I was, during COVID, I go for these long walks and listen to music on headphones like at 6 a.m. before I live in a crowded area in Brooklyn, before there's a ton of people. And your vocals, I always believe you, there's better vocalists that I don't believe what they're singing. But you, I mean, it's part of like, not to be overly appreciative, but it's part of what makes you great. As I was listening to your new record too, which I really want to get to, I believe every word, and I certainly believe Never Say No. Well, this is happening to this guy. So, for what it's worth, let me.
That makes me feel good. Thank you.
Oh, it's so true. Thank you. Moving right along. And I guess I'm getting to you as a songwriter. I have like 10 million questions here. How was it playing with Jimi Hendrix? You met Duane Allman. There's so many, but I don't want to. I mean, you did play with Jimi Hendrix at the Cafe a Go-Go or something?
Yeah, 2 or 3 places. He was a really nice guy. He was not wild at all. At least most of the time, he was just really nice to get along with. And when you jammed with him, we would take turns and not play over each other, and just do it like you're supposed to, And I think he saved all his intensity for the music,
Well, what a thrill. What a part of history. Now, I'm getting to, there's the resurrection of Pig Boy Crabshaw, which is kind of like the first glimpse of Elvin Bishop, as, we all know you, aside from what you've done prior to that.
Yeah.
And In My Own Dreams, you do Drunk Again. And, which is kind of like, here's Elvin Bishop. I mean, unless I'm missing the point here, this song is about a guy who's kind of crushed by his alcoholism, but yet I feel like I'm smiling sometimes when you know, and that's kind of Elvin Bishop. Elvin Bishop could sing, I'm going to get Hank Aaron's baseball bat and tenderize her head. And it doesn't seem scary. It just seems kind of funny, you know? And it's just a great track. And that is you soloing at the end of the tune.
Yeah.
And because to me, it's a great solo. I mean, it's like anything ironic that happened before that, as I just described, like it just seems like it's almost an angry solo or something. And I thought it sounded like a Telecaster. Am I wrong there? Is it you have like a 345?
I think it was Gibson probably, but I could be wrong. My memory's not great for details like that, but I don't ever remember playing a Telecaster on a record.
Whoever's listening to this thing, go check it out. Drunk Again, Elvin Bishop off In My Own Dreams. The solo's just great. Now, here's where I guess we're getting to the new record, which I definitely want to get to. There's one for me, and I've been kind of trying to dig around so I could respectfully interview you, if we want to call this an interview. There's evidence of one Elvin Bishop song that I know of, like iconic Elvin Bishop that we know, and you sign a solo career with Graham's label, Fillmore Records. And you put out a couple records, what Elvin Bishop group, then Feel It, that had So Fine on there, I think. Yeah, I love that song. I remember hearing that, like on the radio. And yet, like, it's kind of like you just emerge. I mean, I don't know, it seems kind of fantastic to me. Like this persona and style doesn't appear until, well, the last Paul Butterfield Blues Band record, prior to this solo career. I mean, you were a young guy, you know, I don't know how old you are here, 25, 26, maybe a little older. You're still a kid, really, in my opinion. But it seems like, what was keeping you from doing that earlier, or what inspired you to do it then?
Well, I was a late starter. I didn't really start playing until I was 15 or so, 16 maybe, and we didn't have any money, so I got all my guitars at pawn shops, and I didn't know any better. I didn't know any musicians or anything. It was kind of like Bob Seger said about working on mysteries without any clues. And all the guitars had strings that far over. I said, damn, this guitar is hard to play. And, so progress was very slow. And when I got with Butterfield, I was very aware of the fact that I was, as they say in Chicago, square as a pool table and twice as green. And so okay, my function in this band is I'm playing the rhythm guitar, basically. I always wanted to play lead guitar. I just didn't know enough about it yet. And I always wanted to write songs, but I didn't have the experience in life to have anything to write about, really, you know? And it's, when you're playing with a band like that, I went along like that for 4 or 5 years. And naturally, they want to keep everybody happy. So they let me do 1 or 2 songs I wanted to do, you know, every night. And I got a little better at it. People liked it. And the idea starts growing in your head. What if I got to do all songs that are really close to my heart? You know, and that builds and builds till finally you just, you have to do it, you know?
Well, thankfully, not that, you know, to diminish your work prior to that, but it's like you're such a unique voice. And I was just curious about that, even though, you know, everybody gets a get out of jail free card if they're 27. You know, I mean, Uh, I, I remember when, I think I remember when I was 27 and thinking I was getting old, but now I look back at or see a 27-year-old, I'm like, God, you're just a kid, you
Yeah.
know? So I guess I have a couple of specific questions, then we'll get to the new record, which I can't wait to talk about. And this is Travelin Shoes. I think I listened to that 20 times in a row for a week, and this is about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And it's just an amazing production. And I was telling my friends, some opinionated snobs, but they're good guys, like, have you listened to Travelin Shoes? It's amazing. And they're like, I'll have to check it out. And I've been trying to tell my friends to listen to it. It's just this epic tune. I mean, there's a harmony guitars, there's a great piano solo, there's background vocals, it's like this tour de force. And I just wondered, like, this is kind of a naive question, like, how do you do it? But how did that evolve into what it is? I mean, was it the producer or the group did it organically, or is there any insights you can give on that track?
Yeah, we worked up the arrangement ourselves. Your first thing to do is make sure you choose really great musicians to work with, I had a great band at that time, and it was pretty much in place when we went in the studio, but the producer, Johnny Sandlin, did a great job of, getting the sound on things and the balance and encouraging the musicians to do certain things and knowing where to place the different performers space-wise in the studio, And so I don't know, it was just came together.
Sure did. And even now, some of the things I marvel at are like, wow, this is a great drum track for 7 minutes, and it's pre-Pro Tools. Like, I mean, even if I listen to a Bee Gees song now, which I didn't like in '76, but now I hear it and I'm like, this guy grooved for 8 minutes and got a great take. And there's that aspect of it too. I mean, I saw that band a number of times at Winterland with Johnny V, that group. And it was like, you guys would come out and it was kind of like getting bowled over by great music and kind of joy. It was just a real festive experience. Great band.
Yeah, good bunch of guys.
Just one more question and we'll get to the new one. And again, these are kind of self-indulgent. Fooled Around and Fell in Love, iconic solo, that you play. And did you work that out beforehand, or, do you work your solos out sometimes in that kind of context?
Sometimes. I didn't on that one. It just kind of happened. And there was a little bit of overdubbing, and, by then it had got around to that, It was, like you say, Pro Tools where they manicure and the whole track and go over it. And the guy's there all night, after you go home, and he's make anything that's offbeat, he nudges it over and gets it, and perfectly in tune and all that shit, It's amazing. I listened to some of the records I loved and bought in the 50s, and some of them are way out of tune. The tempo gets out of hand. It's just things weren't expected to be perfect in those days, as long as it had the feel.
Yeah, they speed up a lot. I've noticed, like, one thing, and I'm not used to that, just being, I don't know, of a different generation. Like, I'll think, geez, that's speeding up. I love it, but it's speeding up. It's no click track.
Well, in those days, there were no computers, there were no iPods, there was no, you barely, you didn't hearing music 24/7 like you do now, you know, as soon as you pop out. But it's people's ears were less sophisticated, I guess, but they still had the feeling, you know.
Oh, they were great. Okay, now we're going to get to, and I'm skipping so many solo records, and I mean you no disrespect. I'm going to start working my way backwards personally. I saw, you know, just to, I saw your video. It's Grounded, what's it called? Locked